Is knowledge really power, or knowledge maintains the power structures? Well, hello there, pretty people, humankind, and welcome to the death of the authentic. Yes, I'm here to speak about academia, hypernormalization, and it governs knowledge and further systems, this is what I'm talking about today. So I'm just here having my coffee in a small cute pot. I am going to speak today about this academia hypernormalization that is extremely crucial in our society and the way we are designed. Really, like, university is extremely strong source of power, and I'm speaking this after my dream of the path in academia was breaking down, like literally 100% breaking down. And this dream was related to so many things that I'm about to open up here. And while I was going to explain to you why I had no other way than to leave the academia, despite my affinities and my interest in critical discourse. What I'm doing here is to try to heal, to recover, and also to maintain future ecological relationships between us, which is not what's happening. So I'm going to start with the legal discourse, and I'm going to move and guide you through this intricate web, because every chapter that I publish is inherently related to each other. They're all part of the death of the authentic. So, are you ready? Because I am. And there's nowhere to hide since you push my love aside. I'm out of my head, hopelessly. So, in every institutional frame, we encounter the impossible proximity between legal discourse and the institutional foundations. Now, the law protects, or more accurately, the law is written in a way that explains how to pass around it, how to break it actually. This is a simple primary discourse that every beginning lawyer or everyone who starts to touch any forms of legal discourse within the roles we participate, whether it's through our contracts or whatever legal actions and discourse we need to learn, because we live in a very legal times. So the legal discourse manages the right or wrong. Now, what is the foundations of those right and wrong? This is where I am showing you that it's all going through this authoritative POV. How will they know what's right or wrong? They will go to the psychiatric discourse, because the psychiatric is supposed to know what is right, what is wrong, what is normal, what is ill. And that means that the legal discourse inherently itself is built on the foundations of the psychiatric discourse, which means, if you know me, you know the answer. You know the answer? Yes, it's true. All the legal discourse is based on the foundations of the past Oedipal narratives and discourses, which means laws rarely accumulate themselves by us, the humans, to really maintain what laws supposed to regulate. Unfortunately, the post-adipolistic narratives remove and omit most of the reality and displace it towards a fantasy. I was explaining this in my post-adipolistic video. You're welcome to see it. Laws now can explain to us, the good abiding citizens, how to move around the laws. And every good lawyer, this is what they do. Like, every law has a loophole. Loopholes are naturally makes it possible for us to commit illegal acts under the laws, under the protections of the laws. And lawyers are built to manage and produce and reproduce those loopholes in order to win, like in front of the courtroom. And it means that those who stand before the judge and trying to establish a reasonable doubt only expand and widen the loophole. It does not mean that it really manifests protection. It only governing these loopholes and the laws themselves and how this is in correlation. So I have built here the foundation that all of this takes place in performances, right? We are all performing, as I was mentioning in my previous video. Like, in the courtroom, this is all part of the performance. Even though the reality is composed, we're much more complex layers. Those narratives, post-adipolistic narratives performed in the courtroom are part of the maintenance of these legal loopholes themselves. And since the legal discourse itself is so activated everywhere, it displays itself inside the academic institution. And it is basically the foundations of the institution. Now, to keep their names valid and good and without plagiarism, accusations and stuff. Well, naturally, laws and bureaucracy are important for the political realization of repair for survivors. This is what we aim and wish to do with laws. In general, there is importance for regulations, for boundaries, for laws. But is it currently simultaneously working and activating this kind of repair or possibility for repair, or let's say vital accommodations to the current reality? We all know that it's not, and there are probably too much information about too many cases that are such. And it means that the legal discourse moves and displays not only the discourse itself, but the resistance and opposing of the legal discourse itself. So hard, therefore, to be in this world, I feel. But thank God I'm not. So legal autonomy is responsible for transferring simulated authorities while compensating, again, this compensation mechanism of the data of the authentic, for feeding the system, McCarthyism. What happens like when we remember too late, like now, to change, to do something? Like, this is all part of the post-adipolistic narratives. It's very hard not only to penetrate to the legal discourse, but to change it from the inside, because there are those kind of formulated and prolongings maintaining that the loopholes will remain and widen for the sake of those narratives. I want to ask, what are the smallest areas that this discourse touches, and like what are the fine capillarities carrying information, and where all this post-idealistic and oppressive persistent trauma, where does it go? And now today I'm speaking about the academia performance, the academia hypernormalization. Academia hypernormalization stations. So the legal discourse touches the academic discourse and based its foundations, which means that the psychiatric discourse and the academic discourse are co-joined. They have tangent points all the time and in many areas. So those points of contacts are shown in this certain academic performance. And as I named this, the whitening performance. I'm gonna do this move to one of my previous videos where I was speaking about performances and this integration between multiple theories that expand and explore this term of performances, such as Rina Badesh, Ervin Goffman, Sarah Ahmed, and Effie Ziv, who conclude this with persistent trauma. And of course, homie Baba and Ahmed extend Goffman's account of impression management, role performances, expression out of character, team performances, etc. And they're all demonstrating how the successful, white, happy, modern, progressed white subject is not merely a strategy or individual strategy, whether it's unconscious or conscious. It's not just that. It's a socially enforced choreography that is affected by so many oppressions that we have depressively assimilated, expectations, even wishes and fantasies that we wish for ourselves. For example, my own fantasy that going to the academia will help me gain status, gain money, get out of the poverty, homelessness, and loneliness that I am in. The common front is organized by political power, cultural aspiration, and the demand to embody the image as normal. Like the final image. It is super normal to see academic people who look like they're from the academia, you know, all those lectures and professors and whatever. And within those performances, we can, through Effie Ziv concept of persistent trauma, we can see how it complicates and extend this intricacy of what appears socially as functional and normal, while there is ongoing symptoms of traumatic conditions that are undiscovered. This pervasive form that I call the whitening performance is not determined solely by skin color, and this is where I go back and touch Sarah Ahmed and Homi Baba, where there is this mimicry and this ambivalence of the hierarchical relationship between the colonizer and the colonized people. This is precisely where the racial paradox signifies articulations that Frantz Fanon was talking about, and trying to extend this racial discourse that color functions not as a pigment, but it's a code, it's cultural code that saturated with fantasies of civilization, of legitimacy, of normalcy, of wealth, of happiness, those things that in some parts of ourselves and our souls we always fantasize because it is the post-Oedipalistic narrative, and it is sold very good. It's super easy to just assimilate that. And those kind of successful post-Oedipalistic fantasies are part of this whitening performance. And this omission exists within the academia. And it is a crucial part to understand this performance. Like in academia and in every institution, there are hierarchical methods and structures. Everyone is dividing their roles and responsibility in relation to what the institutions enforced upon them. Not necessarily to what they can give, not necessarily to what they want or can give, but in relation to the function within the institution. So this omission exists while the academia and education in general passes on education, and it passes it without discoursing about the proximity of the legal discourse, the proximity of the psychoanalytical discourse. All those people with hierarchy in the academia, whatever type or kind of hierarchy, they maintain legal discourse that is attached to psychiatric discourse, and they will not speak about it, and they will omit it from their actions, from their performance. Thus, in the academia, social performance becomes a paradoxical field, like subjects who wants to go inside and expand themselves, whatever, they are compelled to embody certain roles and images and performances and actions and even words that not necessarily belongs to them or to their agency. They need to follow commands that either oppress them or they're witnessing this. They have this obligation to follow their boss's word, their professor's word, because there is this authoritarian relationship, which I will explain soon what this term is. But remember it, because it's super important to signify and understand and read everything that I'm saying. So while this embodiment is occurring within the people who enters the structure, everyone, okay, even like the people who are the bodyguards in the entrance, everyone, they need to embody an image that estranges them from their own psychic and somatic needs. They need to follow up instructions for the institution that is built by humans, yes? And it's actually dehumanization. You know what I was trying to say. Right now it's not going out of me. But it removes their psychic and physical needs. And what happens is that academic performances, these Whiten performances, is simultaneously produces appearance of identity, and the wound itself, those identity ask to remove, ask to recover from. For example, when there is harassments or bullying or something that is, taboo or hard to topic, the first thing the people in the academia will do is talk about it through legal discourse. Give you advices through legal discourse. They're not going to give you empathy, they're not going to give you solidarity, they're actually going to judge you and going to tell you what's the right thing to do, legal discourse. At the same time, most of the people who are making those complaints or requests barely have the same knowledge of legal discourse. Therefore, there's like this huge gap of authoritarian relationship that those people within higher positions are taken advantage of, whether it's conscious or not. That authentic behaves this way. Mostly it's just unconscious. So what can be done when the legal discourse expresses its own bondage within the discourse? this separation from human conceptualization is created through the habitus. I was explaining again in previous video about this one. We'll explain more later. So if the mechanism can be penetrated, we will usually arrive at the fact that professors, associate deans, our colleagues, whatever, are afraid of the consequences of procedures, aka non-performativity. And as a result, these mechanisms is oppressing and designing the identities who pass the institution, which means like a queer BIPOC subject may enact a whitening performance when they reproduce paternalism, exploitation, institutional superiority, or the abuse of hierarchical power as a compensation for being racialized or gender deprived or having been harassed or having gone through maltreatment. Those kind of compensations are in relation to the fact that when people enter the academia, whatever they're going through, they silence themselves, as I was mentioning in Kardashian's episode Foucault. The person governs themselves through the gaze of the surveillance because they don't know when and who is watching. And it's scary, so they govern themselves. It's the same thing in every institution, and it multiplies in different and variable ways. For example, like I was having at Parsons, I had this professor who was mentoring me, and they're like queer, disabled, transgender person. And I was meeting with them a lot, and I was trying to discourse with them about what I'm experiencing within the academic institution. And it was so hard for them to even listen to the word maltreatment. Or when I told that I'm being ostracized, they were like rolling their eyes to me. And I was persistent. I was like still giving them a chance. I was scheduling more and more meetings, trying to really ask them what they would see and feel as beneficial, but they were continuously trying to groom me, not in a sexual manner, but in an authoritative superiority manner, where they constantly shared with me the fact that when they were doing their MFAs, they were like working, I don't know how many hours a week. They didn't sleep, they didn't go to like exhibitions or openings, they didn't have friends at the academia, and it was all for them to be able to finish their MFAs. And I was like, okay, this sounds extremely terrible. And I was sharing with them, like, you shouldn't have experienced that this is very oppressive, and there was not enough accommodations. But when I was asking for accommodations, they were confused, and they were like, what? There are not enough accommodations? What do you mean? We're accommodating so much. And this depressive assimilation of the whitening performance. You need to, even though you yourself has gone through hell while you were going to this path of MFA, you silence yourself so you can reach this fantasy. And once you reach this higher position, you reproduce and this authoritarian relationship and persistent trauma and this superiority within student-professor mentality or mentor mentality. It continuously happened. Like, I was sharing with them that I was prevented from jobs, and I know that I can offer jobs, and they were like shaking the responsibility of them. They were like, this is not my responsibility, you need to speak with the head of the department. And I'm like, I already spoke with them. The reason I'm speaking with you is because I spoke to I, B, C, D. None of them were truthful and helped me, and they were actually lying to me in order to prevent the jobs from me. And they were like, still, it's not my part, it's not my responsibility. I'm like, this is non-performativity. If a person claims to be from those kind of minority and marginalized groups, how can you behave this way for someone who is saying to you that they are being marginalized, ostracized, whatever? Whitening, therefore, is a performance that is in proximity to the dominant power. It's not necessarily, remember, it's not about the pigment, where the control of the power is similarly to the ambivalent of the colonizer by Homi Bhabha. This performance is working in relation to the market fantasy of prosperity, of social value, the mimesis of roles, the mimesis of authoritarian relationships. And with this professor, by the way, I was even asking them, like, I was sharing with them that I was going through a deep unlearning process, because and of course I was crying. Because I unlearned how to create artwork that is without the reproduction of the academic apertos and pathos. It was hard. All my life was toward this goal, so it was a deep unlearning. And they were so in this superior complex that they were like, it sounds like that you're learning that. And I'm like, I was rolling my eyes to them, and I was like, are you for real? This is what I'm unlearning, because it was so hard to unlearn this, because I learned this for years. And I was asking them, what did you unlearn? And they deflected upon me. They refused to answer, and they were like, no, what are you unlearning? And I was like, you are deflecting me. Now, they were not expecting this. I was probably the first student who ever told them they are deflecting. I was like, you're deflecting on me, and I'm going to be persistent. What are you unlearning? And they refused to answer. Until today, I don't know what they unlearn. But this is part of the persistency of this trauma, of being in this widening performance that is allowing someone who is disabled to be so detached, so removed from the self, so they can perform this kind of institutional roles. And it's oppressive for the one who is in a lower position, such as the student, such as the cleaner, such as even the head of the department, who has a lower position than they had. So this widening performance success lies within the subject's ability to manage the front stage and the impression management according to the signs of the institution baseline. Signs that are internalized, and they are thoughtlessness. They are routinized procedures that are saturated with violence, while they're removing the fact that it all comes from legal discourse, from psychiatric discourse, from authoritarian relationship discourse, all of those things. I want to put a footnote that not all the hierarchies have the same performances. Now, I'm trying to dismantle hierarchies all the time, but when you enter an institution, especially the academia or education institution, you need to become extremely aware of those hierarchies and how each one maintains performance. They're all eventually creating a team performance for HyperNormalisation, but each one maintains a different role. When skin color becomes the sole measure through which domination is recognized, testimonial perception is restricted in another binary operation, which means the whitening performance may become illegible when enacted by racialized subject, people, BIPOC people, while the subject visible marginalization, let's say their race, is taken sufficient as proof of ethical innocence. And this is where the problem of the educated, woke, progressed, queer, BIPOC communities is happening, where there is so much anti-Semitism and glorification of radical Islamic perspective, and it's expressed as forgiven because of the marginalization is signified. It's too obvious not to be visible. And this is part of the performative qualities that unfortunately oppressing our somatic body. Unfortunately, yeah, we all wish it wouldn't be this way, but this kind of becoming of dominant / minority it's not goes one way. It will never, nothing goes one way. The wind flows toward the space where there is less wind, but it will always come from a space where there is a lot of wind. So this movement will always be. This recognition is in relation to the dominant power, not in the relation of if you're a marginalized people or if you're a dominant white person. So the question that remains is, what must the subject perform in order to admit to this image of collective legitimacy, more so in our AI era? What do we do? Like this is the denied alibi, and it's self-surveillance because we are governed all the time, you know? AI is like literally, we're all being photographed, videographed from wherever, even through this screen probably. So we need to govern ourselves constantly in relation to this relationship. This is where the academia part, the institution part, is widening the individuals who passes through them. And I'm saying passes through them because I'm gonna, like Sarah Ahmed really extend what it means when your body enters the door and goes in the hallways, opening the curtains. All of those things are happening simultaneously, and they are performances that eventually have a relationship to our body. Okay? This is Rina Badesh, the icosahedron dance theater. You should say this because it's important. The academia works through the authoritarian relationships. Now, what is the authoritarian relationships? It's an interpersonal dynamics based on strict control, a rigid power imbalance, and a demand for absolute obedience, mostly unconscious. And we have authoritarian relationships with our bosses, with the bosses of our bosses. We have authoritarian relationship for the one who are beneath us within the positions. Our parents have authoritarian relationship upon us. We are participant in authoritarian relationship in the family, okay? We have authoritarian relationship on our daughters, on our sons, you know? This kind of imbalanced hierarchical authoritarian relationships is incredible, common everywhere, and we are actively all the time participants. And it's hard not to, like, even myself, I'm pleasing the authoritarian figure, and then later I'm like, what did I do? And then I need to go back again and then remove this hierarchy. But authoritarian relationship work upon us everywhere. The government has authoritarian relationship. The cops have authoritarian relationship. This is something that every institute or person carries and reproduces for the understanding of authoritarian relationship to how we grew up and the parents and the family that we grew up with. But this is something that I will extend in a different episode. So institutional abuse of authoritarian relationship is the most best known mechanism of producing depressive assimilation for those subject who enters the institution. Like when you are a student, you are in this role and the professor has their knowledge, they hold it. You hold knowledge, but they are the one to know, you know. They do know stuff, of course, they have a lot of knowledge to pass us, but the third space of where knowledge and ideas exists is full with temporalisms. It's full with the times between times, and it is not in this hierarchical mode, in this authoritarian mode. Therefore, the professor knowledge is built actually on the integration of this third space, but they try to remove this from the discourse so they can still abuse the knowledge upon the students, and the student themselves will adhere to the roles of having less knowledge, need to silence and, you know, attune to whoever is speaking because they gain the power, they know something we don't know, whatever they know we need to just keep our ears. And I'm like, of course we need to always keep our ears open. At the same time, we need to dismantle this hierarchy because it is not how the world works. We are in a generation where we can bring a lot of knowledge, but we are rarely can bring understanding of emotional regulation, somatic based experiences. Like those things are removed from the discourse, and the institutional and academia keeps it this way. They like it this way because then the persons and the subject who are passing the institute are very submissive and they are obedience. And it's important, this kind of obedience and submissiveness to the authoritarian relationship fulfillment. So how do the institution maintain this performance? Well, it governs the subjects. I mean, gaslighting, grooming, even sexual harassments, isolations, all those things are activated constantly within the institutions. And they are built in order, there are mechanisms, they're actually very, very real mechanisms that happen so that every person who goes inside will obey and design themselves in relation to the mold that those kind of mechanisms are oppressing the subject to be, which means that all the professors that we look up to, they were in some point students who witnessed authoritarian relationship abuse, probably participated and has gone through. Some of them may have gone through sexual harassments and maltreatment, and they needed to silence themselves so they can, for years, get a higher position, finish the first degree, finish the second degree, do the master, do the doctorate, like all of those routines and paths. Everyone who goes through them, all the one who are on the pedestal once they are permanent within the institution, for them to get into this position, they had to go through all these terrible things. At the same time, they needed to omit this from their own discourse and from the general discourse. Because who likes an HR problem, right? This is part of the institution's mechanisms. And if you are groomed and you are very, pleasing and you're doing your part as you're being groomed, you can get into a higher position. But if you resist in some way to the grooming, you will be cancelled, basically. Instead of making complaints, this is the whitening process of the individuals. This kind of Foucaultian systems that those people are depressively assimilating this avoidant and dismissiveness prototype so they can take their parts, play their roles, and wait until someone who has authoritarian relationship upon them will decide that their thesis is good enough, their project is whatever excellently or not, or that they are good there are good candidates for a postdoc, Those are things that I believe that are happening just because people really want a better life. I believe that the widening performance is being done in the academia because people, it's part of the death of the authentic, and how I try to give validation for the death of the authentic, because it is all happening because we want so much stableness and valid and respected life and status. We all want to have enough money to pay rent, to have a good home, to pay for the kids, for the daughters, for college, for education itself. This is part of the bigger loophole that we're all in, that everyone is participating. And this widening performance is not vital. We can see how it is not vital by the fact that there is so much debt for educations, or the gap for education itself is so enormous. And it's sad, because knowledge should not be something that is commodified. Just shouldn't. And yes, this whole authoritarian and abusive relationship is deeply entrenched with the history of academia. Like, it was all like knowledge passing was started as a literally sexual thing, like, and quite gayish thing, which I fancy gay, but abuse of authoritarian relationship and relationship with sexual and physical abuse is something that might have been modernized, but it got so many reproductions that right now this is how it looks. It's not as linear as it was back then, when like the philosopher was like taking this 13 years old boy and like, I don't know, blowjob with them, and while sharing with them Plato. Whatever. Here it's not like this. They will maintain this distance, okay, but they will unconsciously abuse it, so they can make the person who passes the institution to become like them, to have the path that they were going through. And I was understanding this even in my BFA. No matter what, within those institutions, and remember the rules of persistent trauma, it's like everywhere, and the more you meet, the more you have it, it thickens and designed you through the oppressions. So the higher positions that people get within those institutions, especially, I'm speaking right now about the academia, but it's everywhere, okay? The higher positions that they get, the deeper and wider the persistent trauma are. And this is where it's harder to unlearn, much harder to unlearn. While those mechanisms established now to display this non-performativity of awareness to oppressions and rainbow washing, pink washing, green washing, whatever kind of washing progressively word exists, it's all happening through these paradoxical roles of participating in hypernormalization, in common foreground, common performance, common hypernormalization, each role that reproduce the violence that they themselves say that they want to resolve. For me, it's very signifying the ambivalence that Homi Bao is talking about, where there are so many movements, global movements, so many integrations of cultural and colonialization and violence actions, that there is this ambivalence shown as we get aware to how persistent trauma functions within our society, and how the death of the authentic prevents us from dismantling together the hypernormalizations. We need to understand that each subject just participant in each role, whether I am as a complainer or you are the professors or the people in the academia or part-time employees. They participate in their role of abuse of authoritarian relationship and the whitening performance. So with the development of these sophisticated reproductions that, by the way, the people in the higher positions are very aware of. They're actually the ones who are guiding these whole things. The surveillance of authoritarian relationship means that most of the time information will not even get to the higher positions, because people from the lower positions will already remove and omit and will do whatever to do to cover up the complaint, the harassments, the maltreatment, whatever exists. So in relation to the post-Oedipal narrative and performances, this system and mechanisms are very efficient for silencing complaints and not legitimizing like the complaints or the fact that those stuff really happens. When you go through the academia, you will sure foresee like mental problems. Like for me, it was very similar, like when I entered the institution, even for the first time, super similar to closed words. But the difference is that closed words, we are aware because we are there only for our illnesses. And in the academia, we're only there for being normal. And this kind of binarity was amusing for me because I couldn't participate in each role the same way that they wanted me. And I was like, no, I see that these people is like vomiting every hour, and I see this person in this association, and I see this person who cannot speak about their feelings and always happy. I'm like, I see all of those, and I see this kind of violent person who wants to be the best student and like all the professors to like them so they will minimize you. Like I see all of those, and these are not qualities of health, ecological state, nothing of that. So it's very, very disorienting to participate in those roles while the omission of the reality, aka post-Oedipalistic narratives and stories, is happening. Like this hypernormalization is crazy to my eyes, and even to Sarah Ahmed, where she was like writing in so much richness about each part of the design of those institutions, like the doors themselves, there are the gates, like even the corridors themselves, where they are guiding us, the colors of them, the lights, the windows, the curtains. Each part of it is functioned as something that's supposed to guide us how to behave. And I like that she talks also about like the pipes and the leaks and the things that are always like ooze out, because the way the foundations of the things are working currently is stable in some ways, but it's not creating an ecological future for us. It's only reproducing the same violence that we already know in a disguise. I would want to speak about the uniqueness of the art education and the art academia. This integration creates this uniqueness of the art world because it is not as regular academia of education, and it is not just the art world and as it functions. Okay? People in the academia of art are mostly part-time teachers and professors. Mostly. They are rarely there. Those who are full-times are barely artists. This is where it begins to signify how this fluidity between the academic world and the art world is happening, and how it is very narrow, the way to go through it. So art education programs, you have to pass this narrow in order to make it to the art world. And to stay in the institution, you need to really, really depressively assimilate the widening performance. Now, in the art world, it is the community of people who really try and act toward the production of consciousness, of ability to change something in the world. Art for me is everything. Like, it has the possibility and potentiality to really change our minds. And this is where the discourse itself becomes very, very intricate, because those people who come are already has been entered to the role of the marginal people, the people who are odd or naturally crazy. This is the stereotypes and becoming of artists. And it's part of the problem also, because there are not enough boundaries where there should be, and too many expectations where there shouldn't be. And it's never written. It's not like in the academic world where everything is written. You need to write everything. And from those texts, you can see what's omitted. But in the art world, it's rarely written. Rarely. There is much more work about the performance itself, the way we create, and the art itself, and the way the art world or the people, the professors, observe and read your art and your personality, because the identity sells, unfortunately. And the central problem that I was observed is this acute hypernormalization within the art world. There is extreme disguise in these performances. They maintain a binarity and obedience within the institution's legal actions. At the same time, they really, really want art to exist. It's very, very intricate place to be, really. The problem is within these performances is that the students can barely recognize when the boundary is. Like, for example, there was this professor in Parsons who groomed this student who was in my class, and the student was like staying with them after hours, like helping them, giving them their time. And I was like always, oh my gosh, I wish I could do this. I'm so tired. I'm physically ill. I work so many hours on metal, on wood. I need to eat and get some sleep. I don't know how they do this. Maybe because they can, maybe. But those professors made sure the path for those students existed, even like when the student did not ask this. This kind of authoritarian relationships exist all the time. Or for example, there was this professor who groomed me in Bezalel, and she was the head of the department of the video program, and we were of course having male relationship, personal meetings, and I got to learn that whenever she gave a critique to an artist, she always projected what she would do in this project. And I hated it, because I could see that she sees herself. She doesn't think, oh, this is the idea of the student, this is what they wanted to show, and those are the things that needs to be added or removed or changed in order for the student's perspective to be shown. No, this is not what they did. What I was explaining is like the vital accommodations of how to assert authoritarian relationship. But she was doing the opposite of, even more like the most radical abuse of authoritarian relationship, because she removed the agency of the artist and inserted herself as in this position. And I could see that the students acted upon her instructions and later regretted it because it damaged the artwork. And this is not the first time that I know that this is happening. I've witnessed, heard, and experienced this abuse of authoritarian relationship when there's so many artists or who are part-time and have this kind of embedded within themselves this non-boundaries and crazy mentality of superiority, and they allow themselves not to help the student find their own accurate capacity and authenticity within their work. No, they remove them and act upon their artwork, and I feel like it's extreme violence. Extreme, because art is something that comes from within us. I cannot control it. It will always be there. And I can agree when sometimes the things that I do are not accurate. I can do this and then it will amplify what I mean. This dynamic and fluidity is something needed once we are the creator of production of art. But this attempt to govern us and tell us what art is and how it will be accepted, the artists form and change their own art in relation to those words. And this is where I see how much reproduction of authoritarian relationship there is in the art world. Like, what does it mean when so many students creating things that are filtered through the instructions of their professors, even though it damages the art or the mentality of the art? There is this sacred status for the artist and their time. And I understand this. And as an artist, I know that my time is so valuable, super valuable. And I will never, ever, ever, nothing will make me change that, regardless of any authoritarian relationship. But this sacred, elevated space within the academic art world and the art world in these top triangles is suffering. It's suffering from this megalomaniac narcissism, and is suffering from this pornographic of the self, of the visionary artist. And even the museum and the trustees all attempting to maintain these hypernormalizations by, showing their new trustees or this new person who is a BIPOC person, and there isn't yay, the first female whatever. But what did this person do? The head of the department in Parsons, I think she got into the Whitney Museum, and she was maltreating me. It was terrible. She was isolating me. She did not know how to be in solidarity. She did speak in legal discourse, and it got me so obsessed because I was like, why do you speak in legal discourse when I'm saying to you that I'm not willing to speak about this legal discourse? I want solidarity. I need empathy. I need follow-on procedures, A, B, C, D. I don't need the rest. And when they do the rest, it's because it's compensation for what they can do through the legal discourse. Art and everything involved in institutionalizing are present as elevated, enlightened values, and that's supposed to advance society. And I believe that art's supposed to, but right now, when I watch this collective masturbation, I feel disgust. Seriously, I adhered to the art educations for years of my life, and I feel it's gross. It's literally gross. So many communal narcissism, people who are dismissive avoidance, so many death of the authentic, you're supposed to drink wine and eat cheese while you know this man raped this girl, and while you know this professor was harassing this man, and you need to be all like, oh, art, no, how can I be this way? It's like, for my state, it is making no sense to behave and perform this way while these kind of relationships exist. It's super not ecological relationships. This causes isolation for the complaints. This is part of the mechanisms of the art world. It's so hard because you've been isolated within the art world after you try to go out from the academia. Because especially in Israel, everybody knows everybody. In New York it was different, but the institutions are not. The MoMA, Whitney, all of those, Met, all those institutions are relying on the fact that it will be rarely recognizable, the kind of authoritarian relationship there is in the art world and in the art academy. Because it's not linear and it's not written necessarily, and it's basically on 101. For example, after Bezalel, I was trying to, I was applying for studio programs, for residency programs, but the teacher who tried to groom me, and she was covering up the complaint that I had on the professor that sexually harassed me. And he also showed his penis in a video in our class. And she was covering this up for years because look, this is how reproduction happens. He was the head of the department. He gave her job. So while he stopped being the head of the department, he still had the authoritarian relationship on them. So while he was professor, the head of the department covered him for a decade, covered any sexual harassments and assault he ever did. This is while I was in the academia, and later when I was applying, she blocked all my submissions. While she knew that I graduated in honors, while she knew the quality of things that I'm making, while she knew that I was a rare one and the best graduated from the class. She knew all of this, but she canceled all because she was this dominant person in the art world, and she could do it. These cycles of going to the academia, and especially the art world, and having to undergo this authoritarian abuse and obedience, it happens in every academia, because every academia carries these hypernormalizations and mechanisms. These are the foundations that the institutions are built upon. In Parsons, it happens in English, maybe with some bad translations and some different appearances. At the same time, those mechanisms were very visible. I know that I am not the only one, because I got to learn this with time. It's just that there is this cost of speaking up that I did not know at the time, but I could not speak up. The institution is absolute. It's like there is no games. It's all or nothing. Either you depressively assimilate by saying, I will change this from the inside, but until you get to the inside, you already changed by the systems and the protocols and the people who have authoritarian relationship upon you, who are governing you, who makes you feel dismissed, who made the professors harassed. I don't know, you know how many sexual harassments I was witnessing within the professors? Scary as fuck. And it's not only about this, it's about this persistent trauma that is happening to the people who we look up to, and they never tell us the difficulty and the scarcity and the fear of losing their position, of the relationship with their bosses, of like all of these kind of things that are very, very much part of this reality. So when you go inside, you can understand that you are suffering, but not necessarily. Like the assimilation that you will have to undergo is real. You are navigated through these walls, through those things. And the authority is not singular, it's not fixed. Most of the professors are really, in the art academia, are part-time. You need to maintain the relationship afterwards, especially with the reference. And like in the academia, if you stay within the academia, you need to really silence yourself until you are 40 and you stabilize yourself in a higher position. Like, imagine how destructive it is for the mental self. It wounds us repeatedly. It wounded our parents. It wounded everyone around us who passed through the academic institution. And the uniqueness of the art world, it is very acute. There are no boundaries. There is this kind of sacred positions for art in the name of art, even when it harassed or assaults people. Like, do you know how many photographers photographed the women that they raped while they were raping them? And those artists are like, wow, it's so beautiful, and like, it's super common. Or woman who rapes other women, super common. And it's also in the art world, but we need to silence ourselves. And it's not just that, it's just by forcing us to be designed so we can be this successful student, while the criteria are nothing even to get close to successful human behavior. Not successful human behavior, let's say the best students who got to pave their path gave more than they could give, and it cost them their body, their soul. But this is the part of the criteria and the non-discord operations that exist within the art academia. Like, if you would pay, I don't know, crazy amount of money to paint the walls, you will be loved and adored. But if I don't have the money or the time or the powers to do all of that, but my art is still very accurate, I won't be adored. Those kind of qualities are boundaryless. And when you are inside the art academia and put boundaries for the people who try to put boundary for you, and you're like, no, this is not the place for the boundary to be. The place for the boundary to be is here. And they're like, you're crazy, you need some help. They groom you and they gaslight you. I just spit. I mean, how this enter of the field of art, if I'm an artist, not if, I'm an artist and want to be in the art world, like, how does it completely distort the core, that space? At this moment, there is a split of possibilities. Every possibility already contains a price. And the whitening performance is the action and performance where is this depressive assimilation of these features of authoritarian relationship, of obedience, of silencing, and remaining these performances to stay within the institution. It will usually consequence with, successful, whatever white happy performance there is. But at the same time, it will prevent the wound to heal, the recovery needed. Now, if we decide not to depressively assimilate this, we move towards the complainant. And the complaint does not enter the institution as neutral information, not at all. From the moment we speak about the complainant, from the moment it has spoken in general, it exposes the gap. It exposes the gap between the way the institution presents itself and the way it operates. And this gap is something to know and to notice from. The problem becomes the complainer or the person who points out the problem. When you hear them, you have affinity of like, oh, this is bad, oh, sexual harassment, oh, sexual assault, oh, maltreatment, oh, gaslighting, all those things are like disturb the atmosphere, disturb the order. And once you speak about the complaint, there is this infinite splits of possibilities that occur. It's not like there is this free choice and like the best vital possibilities. No, the institution itself split and open and close paths for you to operate. Like I'm going to show you here this image that Sarah Ahmed showed of how complaint's supposed to look like and how it operates. But once you make a complaint, you understand that this is how it actually looks like. A mess. No understanding, nothing. It's all just a mishmash mush. And once you speak about this complainant, you notice this gap, you will risk isolation. You will think of withdrawing the complaint because there were so many professors and teachers and people with authoritarian relationship who will tell you that whatever you're going to do, you're going to go through something very, very hard, maybe sometimes to speak with the harassor, and it's scary. And there are many possibilities. Like there is this legal possibility of really going to the police, there is legal possibility of making an official complaint, there is this legal possibility of talking about it without saying official complaint, but the institution still have to open up a file about it, even if it's not like, those kind of operations are there. And part of my learning of how to navigate complaints is to learn that those possibilities exist. But once you made a complaint, you need your own. Each person who decided to speak, they need to choose in what path they would want. It can go. What I would try is to adjust the possibilities to the complainer and the person who is like killing the joy, and less towards the institution's paths and operations. Once it all happens and you make official complaints in the academia, and this is part of the mechanisms that deprive the reality to be actually discussed, you will meet so much suspicions, hostility, like invalidation, silencing, and the eraser of the complaint as it is not occurred, or that what you have occurred is not valid. Those mechanisms are operated by each roles and persons within the institutions, which means that after all these people have operated, this professor, this colleague of the professor who harassed you, the head of the department, the manager for sexual harassment department, HR, all those people do these mechanisms of gaslighting and isolation and invalidation. In 101, they will always call you for meetings. They will be like, okay, I'm super, I just heard this, immediately let's schedule. But instead of talking about what happened with the person who did this or had abused their authoritarian relationship in some sort of way, they will isolate the complainer. They will make pressures on the complainer, whether probably through legal discourse. And the complainer is completely alone in this. Because first, it's super hard to understand this legal discourse. It's super scary. It literally The somatic body shows, it's like tummy aches, pain, muscle, like the jaw, it's like everything. And those things are secondary injuries. What are secondary injuries? They are injuries that occurred after the first injury is talked and happened. Secondary injuries are produced by institution and communal response to the origin injury. They're called secondary because their temporal relation is in relation to the primary injury. It does not mean only that the damage becomes somatic. It's like real things. It's like bureaucratic things and even legal things. But the somatic body is the one to register in, and the secondary injuries are coming from all the people who are in this chain and want to silence you, so the status quo of the hypernormalization will stay, so that the good name of the institution will stay. The factors of the secondary injuries are produced with how the institution handles the complaint. Like, they produced further harm by navigating you in this path where the complainer has to not only becomes the problem, but in order for get some validations, you need to go through hell. You need to speak, to repeat what happens with like 7 different people. None of them communicate with each other, but you need to explain this to them again and again and again, which is very similar to the way psychiatric words happen. And every time they themselves, with their own subjectivity, they will decide if this is valid, not valid, whatever, and they will always silence you. They will always be suspicious, and each one of them will exhaust you. It's exhaustion. It's very, very procedure exhaustion to isolate the complainer from the community, to make secondary injuries from the community, because the students, what they would do, they have authoritarian relationship upon them, so they mimic the one with authoritarian relationship, so they will join the professors. They will become hostile toward the complainer. The moment I spoke in Bezalel, my fellow classmates did all of this, and it took me a year and a half to remove myself from all those relationships, because I was reproducing it every single time. I went with them and I spoke with them about harassments, about complaints, about those methods, about everything. Every time they devalidated me, they were suspicious. They were like telling me, to what I know, this is not sexual harassment and stuff like this. And like, it's very 101 victim blaming. But I really, really, like, it's like unconsciously, this is what you need once you go through this kind of stuff, especially within the academic institute and the academic frame. And there is also the collapse of what happened to the community. Like, it really breaks the foundations of the community, and there is this secondary injuries for the community who witnessed it, who had to be bystanders because they did not have the mental capacities to speak about what they witnessed, or the fear of speaking up. Even in some rare points, they understand what's going on and they want to speak up, but they know that if they do, they will become the problem, and they don't want to take part of it. And the complainers only want solidarity. They only want their friends to be nearby and show them that it's not cool to sit and have a great time with a professor who raped and assaulted other students, or with this colleague person who raped his girlfriend, and now she's like going through hell because she has to meet him every day at class. And the classmates, what they do, they hang out with him. It's so much easier in the current discourse and the current legal and institutional discourse. It's very hard not to mimic it if you go through this path through the community, to isolate the complainer and to support and believe the people who have made harm. And this is one of the reasons why the death of the authentic is a not ecological place, because what kind of ecological disaster it is if we are unconsciously, just observational point, as communities, when some abuse of power and harassment and gender harassment or assaults happen, we rarely believe, and we are making the complainer to always share with us what happens so we can validate her or make suspicions, while we are still making possibilities, paths for the rapist or for the harassers or for the human, women, queer people who made the harm and secondary injuries. All those things could be prevented if the community in one would be like, whoa, bro, you don't speak this way, or whoa, listen, you head of the department, I understand you're queer, trans, whatever. It does not change the fact that you cannot speak this way, and this is abuse of authoritarian relationship. The complainers would feel so much in solidarity, and their rehabilitation process would be so much efficient if the community would respond this way. This is a vital accommodation, but unfortunately, this is not the way it happens, and this is why the secondary injuries just continue to echo, even years after it. Invalidation, ostracization, exclusion, isolation, all real thing that happens once you make a complaint. And this is all part of the reason of people are scared to make a complaint. And this is a reproduction of persistent traumas. This is how the status quo and the hypernormalization in the academia maintained. It's just the way it is. And unfortunately, it reenacts harms. So the complaint itself, if we also think about the complaint itself as a signifier, we see once these are discussed, the post-Oedipalistic narratives and legal discourse are realized and becomes reality. This testimonial validation the complaint begins to undergo, the institution displays it to the way she perceived this, the way the complaint perceived this. And this is part of what the institution wants you to think. Once someone tells you, I'm so sorry that this is how you felt, I'm so sorry that this is the way you saw this. Gaslighting. This is gaslighting. What you should hear is, wow, you had gone through sexual harassment. This man should be very far from you right now. We will do anything in our power to make sure this happens. Or if it happens within the community. Hi, I understand that your boyfriends did this. This is absolutely unacceptable. We're gonna be by your side, and we're gonna make sure he will feel uncomfortable because of that. We're not gonna kill him, but we're for sure gonna make sure he knows that this is unacceptable. Those kind of vital accommodations are restricted, omitted, and so hard to be performed within the institutions because this internalization is expected. This depressive assimilation is expected. And you are, even if you're making a complaint, you're still expected to be obedient. What are the consequences of those kind of things within the academic hypernormalization? One of the consequences that I'm going to speak about, which is extremely important, is the underreporting, which is the absence of record in general. There is not reporting. Those mechanisms that I was explaining of what happens once the foundation of the post-Oedipalistic narratives inserted within the foundations of the academic world, and we're trying to speak about sexual harm, gender harassments, maltreatments, abuse of authoritarian relationships. So once this all happening, all of those mechanisms produce underreporting. There are three conditions that must be distinguished here. Those three conditions together creating underreporting. So first, there is this non-reporting of the incident or the injury through the internalization of the subject, which means that the person who got to undergo the injury silence themselves and not share this with anybody else because maybe they are scared of being judged, being silenced, getting devalidations, those things that people are quite anticipating once they understand that this is what they're going, because that's the reality. The humankind and the death of the authentic work this way. They know that they will meet the death of the authentic, even if they do not know that this is the term. They will meet those kind of things, and it creates this kind of Foucaultian surveillance, and they will not share this with anybody until maybe years later. Also, what is happening is that there is underestimation of what happened in the report. Okay, let's say you make this official within the institution will minimize what actually happened in the record, in the formal record, and will capture only a small portion of what really happened. Therefore, you will get devalidation and ostracization within a formal measurement. And there is also this underreporting where once it got shared, the incident got shared, was told, the testimony was given to a friend, to the professor, to the head of the department, to an anonymous survey, all those are lost, narrowed down, and passed onward. There are very, very dismissiveness around this. Therefore, all of those kind of things happen at the same time, and they are creating underreporting. The anticipation of the secondary injuries and the split is something very crucial. And when we address this underreporting, and if we want to maintain a more ecological relationship between us, first we have to make sure the complainer feels safe, feel that they, no matter what are the paths, we understand the reason of underreporting. We understand the paths of what will happen once the complaint are made, or if the incident happened. We have this ethical and moral decision making here, where we either make sure the person who got to undergo the injury will feel safe sharing what happened, and then to be by their side once they have to undergo all these testimonial difficulties. So underreporting, therefore, can be both an effect of actual anticipated secondary injuries and a condition that enables their continuation of the secondary injuries. And this gap is occurring, and it is not distributed evenly. It's not like it's all flat and everything. Remember, we are in this very, very wide and thick modes. The academia maintains a very thick hypernormalization. It's super, super important in our societies, the academia. So there is a dependence on these temporary contracts all the time, like a visa, a scholarship, a reference, accessibility, a network, or institutional recognition. When I say that this is not distributed evenly, it means that there is certain alterations for the likelihood that each testimony, how it will be received and with credible. So every occasion where the person reporting will be marked as unprofessional or producer of the problem is very entrenched with this widening performance of this superiority and this navigation of successful, happy, normal paths. And when the institution counts only those complaints that manage to survive the route that they paved, as I was mentioned, the absence itself, the absence it produces, is evidence, and it signifies that there is a big problem here. Like, underreporting becomes this epistemic machine of the institution and the hypernormalization of the institution. The institution is good with collecting information. It's good with collecting archives. It's good with knowing that whatever it produces, it will be reproduced in the future. But the absence of what is removed, aka Ariela, Aisha, Azulai, from all the reports, from the underreporting or non-reporting, it's all showing that this is evidence of the authentic and how it controls the singular person and the roles of the team performances and the hypernormalization in general. This absence show us that it happens simultaneously with a reach too thick of incidents and secondary injuries spheres. Now I'm going to bring this Karen Kelsky, Sexual Harassment in Academy. This was a survey and it was anonymous. I was reading this, it's very trigger warning, but what she did was creating this public spreadsheet of people who share whatever injuries occur to them within the academic institutions, whether they reported it, whether they decided to follow it, whatever thing and route and path of split they decided to do. It doesn't matter, write it down. And there were thousands of testimonies. So many of them are underreported. And this kind of signification of this mutual pathology of the ones that internalize and depressively assimilate all the oppressions that asks us to minor ourselves, while the same operations and the same institution who asks this keep mechanisms and protocols of surveillance within the people who operate it to reproduce this loophole. So this spreadsheet, I'm gonna add it in the description. It's very, very interesting to read it, and it's very, very interesting to follow up on the tied knots work. This is a website that works within Karen Kelsky's corpus, and it moves to the form of visualization, of data visualization. It's full with narratives and how it works, and I have some stuff to say about the way they design it, the color, or the organization of the data itself. Like, it's paper, it's all, you will see this if you will go to the website itself. But the way they formulated and designed the complaint itself and the circles itself, I have some things to say about it. But I think it's a very interesting experience of what representative data visualization we can make from this kind of underreportings. And it's very interesting. It's like making a mold, and it's like both in and out. But what is the in, what is the out? It's all came together. The institution has made this kind of situation and formalization while there was a depressive assimilation at the same time. This institutional archive that remove from knowledge and history and the archive itself so many knowledge, and the underreporting is actually creating this counter archive where if we would start to accumulate the appearance of testimonies whose absence is shown, we will get to learn the amount of underreporting and the incidents that actually happens, which is magnitude. And just learning what are happening once you make a complaint. Most of the people, was also part of my goals. It's once you make a complaint, you rarely finish the academic path because the isolation, it's like terror. Your body goes through hell. Panic attacks, depression, eating disorders, all of those kind of things are very, very alive once you go those things within the academic institution, because it's the secondary injuries make things million times worse. The secondary injuries are the one who makes the most difficult, because it means that the injury itself becomes something that is so distant from what I currently experiencing, from the fact that all my friends have gaslighted me and decided that I'm not worth spending time with or whatever. So when I address this underreporting, I also address the death of the authentic and the fact that it's also like that. We can see it constantly, it's everywhere. And it is designed but what we are not saying, by the absence of things. And what I aim here is to dismantle this hierarchy, but talking constantly about this counter archive, talking constantly about the fact that even if we are missing with reportings or facts or legal evidence, the reality shows us that the baseline is that the most common thing is to go to the institution and to undergo maltreatment, harassment, abuse of authoritarian relationship. This is what's happened. Omitting these things create mechanisms that produce the whitening performance and the underreporting. So I'm gonna start personally with a case study. I'm gonna speak shortly about Butler. I was mentioning Judith Butler in the performance video because we cannot speak about performance without bringing out Butler's work. But here I'm going to bring a case study that does not speak about her work. It speaks about her letter defense to Avital Ronell. Do you know who Avital Ronell? So, she's a professor, a very bestie of Butler and a lot of famous philosophers, writers, and academic people. And Avital Ronell, she sexually assaulted and harassed her student for years. And he filed, after gaining evidence and everything, he filed a lawsuit against her. And Butler sent a letter to support Avital Ronell. It's like a petty letter, to be honest. I was shocked to read it because I was like, Butler, for real? But you can read that this is the way she reads their performance in general. Like, her friend is recognized institutionally to belong. And Butler itself is belonged to the institutional framework, which means that she and Avital Ronell have depressively assimilated those kind of performances, those kind of widening performances. So it obviously that this performance granted Avital Ronell and Butler itself to inhabit the institution codes, to reproduce a language, to secure their place within the hierarchies and support each other while they are making harassments and sexual assaults. And it's crazy that Butler's own public performance reveals the mimicry, even through her theories, is disappeared. It's obvious that through her case study that the subject may criticize authority, while simultaneously depressively assimilating the gestures of the authority, the language of the authority, and the modes of protection. Therefore, this is why she felt like it's legit to send this petty letter to support Avital Ronell in front of the academia, in front of the scholars, in front of the world, and to sign many lectures and academic people who are all very famous. And this is what happens when the burden of ethical discomfort is displaced, like onto the person that is harmed by the institution. Like, what happens here, we can learn this from this case study, is that Judith Butler suffers from moral injury. Moral injury is a persistent trauma. Moral injury is when you participate in actions that are contradiction your moral beliefs, your ethical beliefs, your standpoint. And this is what Butler has done. All her life she criticized the gender performance while depressively assimilating what gender means and how we should write and talk about it, and showing that no matter what's your gender, race, whatever, if you are in a higher position in an institution and you're doing harm for others, you will get supported, as even if it's like a female smart and academic person. So this incident demonstrates us that the institution demands the subject to preserve their position and their fellow kind position, to preserve the hypernormalization and the team performance, which causes, again, secondary injuries and unethical consequences. Like, what does it mean when Butler is writing? Maybe she also wrote a second letter, like, to apologize. Why does she participate in this performance, this apparatus of the academic performance? Why does it go beyond the ethical and moral boundaries that should be adhered? Like, if you criticize the way we perform in gender roles, how could you not see that the gender role that your friend has created is mimicry of violence and abuse of authoritarian relationship, whether if it's a female? It doesn't matter. This is still what happens. And this case study really asks which subjects are permitted to feel free within institutions and which are made to experience their presence as frictions, as disturbance, as a complaint, or even more fundamentally, like, can freedom exist within institutions who comfort depends upon regulating who may belong, who must remain uncomfortable, and whose pain must be removed from the discourse? So what happened when the injured subject is required to observe these secondary injuries? Consequently, it thickens the persistent trauma within the somatic body. I'm gonna send you to read those petty letters and read the lawsuit against Avital Ronell to understand how deep this depressive assimilation of persistent trauma works even within people who has gained a class, a status, a name, maybe a value, I don't know. So I'm going to move on to a second case study, which was happening while I was doing my MFA at Parsons. So we were participating in this class called Professional Practice, where we would meet artists and go to exhibitions, and we would supposed to have a discussion. So we went to the MoMA, where we visited Latoya Ruby Frazier, the Moments of Solidarity, And it was supposed to be like, we went there, we were supposed to go through the exhibition, write notes, and then make a discussion with the artists. But first, I want to say, Latoya came from communities subjected to environmental and economic violence in the United States, which means that her beginning of creation and the artist procedures are something that really, really changed the way those discourses are activated. I cannot erase from my mind the entrance of the exhibition where it was her first works. Not all of it, but the images are so direct, so exposed. She came from photography, and I think this is the medium where she activates in the most accurate form. So I understand that this is a whole experience of exhibition, but I want to start from the beginning because from my perspective, the name of exhibition, Moments of Solidarity, was misleading. It was not Moments of Solidarity. It was a retrospective without solidarity, to be honest. But it was a retrospective, to my opinion. Once you enter, you see those pictures, you see terms of pollutions, and then you start to move within the exhibition. At the beginning, I feel the humility. The trauma as experienced as persistent, but then there is this sense of institutionalization of the whitening performance that starts to begin, aka the post-adipolistic narratives. We enter it strong, okay, but when we move the exhibition, we get to see a performance installation with different lights, and those different lights are create this kind of nationalist tools. At the same, yeah, I know she's criticizing them, but she's mimicking them. So if there is an image of that without a glitched or distortion, it's a reproduction. And those nationalistic and religious iconography and installations were repeated within the exhibition, and it was excessive. It was extremely excessive. Okay, we go through this thing, and then there is this new project where Latoya described and worked with Black social workers who had labored through COVID pandemic, and she referred them as invisible, and there were like these poles of medical frames, and in each one they had a picture and a long text that they themselves, the social workers, has written about themselves. It was very thick, text accumulated across the walls, but rather than producing identification with solidarity, it often seems to recenter political identity, an exclusive ground from which solidarity can be imagined. So once we move to the COVID and Black social workers integration of the community that Latoya was doing, there was this repetitiveness of positioning them as invisible. And this distinction is matter. It matters very much because they're not invisible, they're just transparent. This absence that she was positioning herself while claiming these people are invisible, it reveals that this performance, this widening performance, puts the artist in position of a quasi-divine position of revelation. Like, she said that they are invisible, and with her work she put them in a position of power, and she gave them the space to bring out those texts, to bring out their words. What is she, a god? I was like, they're social workers. You are not creating this in relation to them. You're creating this in relation to your own retrospective. This is why I felt it was displaced. It's not momentous of solidarities. These are not solidarity. The solidarity is to work with those social workers and to be with them while they're like, each one has solidarity in a different form, because objectivity solidarity is very variable, and showing that solidarity comes from recognizing invisible stuff and then revealing them and giving them the stage puts the artist in a position of God. And this is part of the reproduction of the authoritarian relationship, and it came through the colors of the lighting and the framings and the sounds, super nationalist. And even like there was a lot of like this regionalism that was full and saturated with the ambivalence of how repair and compensation are divided and differentiated. Repair seeks transform the condition of the injury, and compensation seeks authority within those conditions. So after going through this exhibition, we were supposed to have a conversation with Latoya, but instead of having a conversation, we were all sat down on the floor, on the ground, all of us, beside Latoya, who stood up and lectured us for 3.5 hours. And I said lecture because this is how the discourse was. There were rarely time for questions, no air, non-stop, 3.5 hours. Like imagine, I was super dissociative, and the whole discussion of telling us what her decision making was and all of that, like Latoya delivered an extant account of values that should be govern social repair and representation in United States, but this was not necessarily the topic and the meaning of the conversation. This was a very, very place where they were like the teachers, the lecturers, and we were supposed to listen and learn to whatever, but it was supposed to be a discussion about the exhibition, about the functions of the exhibition. There were no meaningful space was created for those who were present. None. For 3.5 hours. There was not even a discussion beside Latoya's deep investigation about her insistence in the contract, which, yeah, being persistent in the contract is great, but this is not this is not art. This is not how art decision is made. This is a bureaucracy. And the fact that it's integrated without boundary, while Latoya itself put herself in such a position to define what solidarity should be look like, with all the institutional prestige, it was in the MoMA, right? The whole thing enacted the very hierarchy and the language of the institutional prestige. MoMA functions not only as a museum, but it's a gatekeeper for artistic becoming. It determines which practice are recognized, which forms of public get legitimized, which subject enter art histories. So we are part in the art world of reproducing this kind of obedience. And Latoya was showing this in the greatest Whitening performance, despite the fact that she comes from such a black and with the ecological disasters in the United States, which means I could see in a very simple significations the implications of persistent trauma on the long term and how it really distorts the path for ecological future. Because what happens when this person for 3.5 hours, without reading the room, without understanding what it means to have a really discussion about the kind of art in the space that she was creating, it's only abuse of authority. It's exploitation of the position of the artist. Yet, I was super dissociative, I was submissive, I remained quiet all along, and it was a terrible experience for my end. Terrible, and I'm sure it was not the same thing, but I kept this for myself because I knew what will happen if I will start speaking about it. So I wanted time to digest it. So I left MoMA early as possible, and that was the moment where I realized that I'm not participating in this anymore. When I walked out of MoMA, I was starting to cry, and then I saw this lady who were crying. And then I stopped. I was asking her if I can hug her. And she was like, these people are like, how can they live here? New York is so hard. The people are like, and I was like, yeah, I know. And I gave her a hug, so strong, until her body relaxed. I don't know her. I don't know her name. But I gave her a hug and I told her that I have to go, but I will stay with her as long as she needed. And I stayed for a while. She cried and she spoke about how hard it is for her to live and see all these people run and do all of this. I wanted her to remove the shame from just crying there and feeling that she was like, no, I'm so sorry that I'm crying. And I was like, no, you shouldn't be sorry. Like, I hugged her like this. This is what I had to do. I had to create a counter performance of solidarity, because I was so detached at this performance. I was so shocked to see the way the art world and the art academy and the art institutions are reproducing whitening performance, reproducing abuse of authoritarian relationships, while claiming that they are doing this for communal actions, which is extremely communal narcissists. But I had to do this. Once she calmed, I moved on to my house and had a panic attack. And then I cried and hugged myself. This is what solidarity is, to be also with the body and not just detached in this kind of reproduction. So the academia functions as a functional persistent trauma. It produces knowledge, but it also produces authoritarian relationships of knowledge, the abuse of power within the knowledge. I participated in many discourses where students were trying to think how to imagine forms of organization that produce change within the art world. But I felt such a deep grief because I knew that all the things that are given on the table are based on the foundations of those institutions. They did not ask for once, how do we get out of these cycles? They really wanted to think about something, but only within the limitations of the institutions. And this is where I felt like very lonely, because I knew that in order to stop and dismantle the hypernormalization, we have to stop copying and mimicking familiar ideas and familiar hierarchical structures and the capitalism structures and this collective front. We have to stop participating in that and change the way we are organizing our roles together. Non-hierarchy might change the way things are echoing. It's hard to imagine because it's not built from zero, and it does not mean that there is zero relationship with money to it. There's a serious questions. How do we operate knowledge and power, information, while those institutions oppress our bodies and minds? They're designing us how to think, what to say, and how to perform. There is accommodations, many accommodations in front of us. We are also have the potential to decide for the vital accommodation, which is to speak about this counter archive, to create these counter performances of solidarity, to speak about underreporting, to take in consideration the fact that in every institution, mostly daily, there are sexual harassments and assaults and abuse of authoritarian relationships in any kinds of forms. Those supposed to be the baseline. And there is no pedestals for professors. They are people as us, and we just share common knowledge to make it common. the difficulty of institutions to develop is going beyond themselves or the political or economical spheres. Of course, it's all in relation, because the economical and political spheres are in relation to the people who operates the hypernormalization. But the idea that the difficulty is economic and political only is mere post-Oedipalistic narrative. Like, human being base this entire administration on a particular performance, like a marketing company that wants to advance economically perform false marketing of repair, greenwashing, whatever washing there is, or maxing there is, or identity selling there is, or governmental and hypernormalization selling there is. A hospital that wants the greatest possible fundings, hides all of its mistakes, that it can produce this false image of advanced medical aid, like while it has a contract with insurances that remove responsibilities of health and Medicaid. Like, those things are activated by humankind. We are all participants, and those kind of depressive assimilations are not mistakes. They are inhibited within our performances. But we have more options, like, yes, political acts cover them. Yes, knowledge and art in the name of art covers them. But the less institution produce connections between us, the greater human separation will become. And for me, the future enters art. The future is what showing us that art and time they do not enter this vital accommodation and does not advance the ecological values right now. But art exists within all the temporalisms. It is navigating us. It is what allows us to have our own affinities and joy, even when we kill the joy. So from within, understanding this presence of saturated distress, allowing the future to come inside and say that there are more possibilities for vital accommodations, despite the fact that most of the art today is penetrated by the past and reproductions of mimesis, of widening performances, rather than growing within the future. I believe that with the art that I make or some artist makes, the future comes to now. The future enters us. And the art I encounter within the academic institution is not that. It's rarely that. Maybe if I would continue follow on within the academic institution, it would stay. But right now, to keep it within the institutional frame is not that efficient. Maybe we should do it at the same time there is institutional art. I refuse to fixate this excess trauma within my artistic performance. I am sick and disabled, but I will put boundaries. I will not work myself non-stop until I die. I will not prevent myself food, sleep, even money for food. I'm going to do everything in my possibility to make sure that I will live, not merely survive, and that it will cost me the performance, the functional performance of the institutional hypernormalization. But if I will participate in the hypernormalization, it will wound me continuously, endlessly, until however. This is taxing our soul and our minds and our ecological relationships within each other. But art and solidarity and boundaries, taking responsibility of how we perform, what we say, what we do. You know, when I make my sculptures, Every hammering that I do on my metal, I see it, I look at it. Or every welding, I weld and I look. Or in the woods, like when I carve, and then I look. I don't persist with the immediacy of mimic, of doing the actions to maintain the performance. I stop. I let the future go within before I continue to the next hammering. So I want to finish up here with this quote from Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke. One could easily convince us that nothing has happened, and yet we have changed, as a house changes when a guest has entered. We cannot say what has entered. We may never know. But there are many indications that the future enters us in just this way, to transform itself within us long before it happened. The more patient, quiet, and open we are towards sorrow, the deeper and truer does the new move into us and become our fate. So the new is the vital accommodation of understanding that academia is a hypernormalization. Every person we meet once we pass these corridors and doors is part of the death of the authentic. And if we want to rehabilitate, whether through art or through law school or through medical education, we can participate in this Whitening performance regardless of gender, ethnicity, race, nationality, but we can choose not to. And by choosing not to, we can become the problem. But if we are the problem together, we are no longer defined as a problem by the other. And I want to make sure here that hugs are important. Being with each other, understanding that the baseline is the death of the authentic, harassments, sexual harassments, gender harassments, maltreatments, abuse of authoritarian relationship, all of this. Let's make a song. Woo! Woo! Yes, I'm finishing this one. You all beautiful people, humankind. So thank you for tuning in. I know this is an intricate topic, but I will be compassionate towards myself because I feel always, as always, that I wasn't accurate with my words, because English is not my native tongue. If it was Hebrew, I would speak perfectly, flawlessly, for sure. But this is a decision making, and this is part of the performance. And this is where I tell you, Toda, Gash, Shalom, peace, Yani. And I'm going to see you next time in my next episode.